Hello, everyone. Praise the Lord. Let's move on to the next chapter of our text, that is chapter 8, lesson 8. And in this chapter, basically, we will be talking about the books of Exodus and the book of Numbers. So let's begin and let me start sharing the screen so that it may aid us in following the chapter. Okay. So lesson 8. So we'll be serving the books of Exodus and Numbers. So first let us look at the book of Exodus. Exodus is a very interesting book, we all know, and probably we all have read this book many times. It is a story, it is an exciting story that we see. Okay, so let's look at the term first. The term Exodus comes from the Greek word exodus, okay, which is taken from the chapter 19, verse 1, which basically talks about a going out or departure. Okay, the Hebrew title is Shemoth, which also happens to have the same meaning. Okay, so let us look at the themes that are found in the book of Exodus. Okay, so we have already seen there are four themes in the Pentateuch: election, covenant, Exodus, and law. And the first two were found in Genesis itself. The next two, Exodus and law, are the main themes of the book of Exodus. Okay, so let's move into the themes. So the first theme, let's look at the first theme of the book of Exodus, which is Exodus itself. Okay, so this event is actually a very important event in the history of Israel because everything is connected with that only as they came out from the land of slavery, as they came out from the land of Egypt, how God was with them. So it was a very important event, and the people of Israel always remembered and reflected on those events that happened when they were departing from the land, when they were going out from the land, and they were moving away from the land of Egypt or slavery. So we can see that and they sang a lot of psalms about it also. So this event was actually a most memorial event, a most remembered event, and the story was told generations after generations, and everyone knew about how God rescued them, about how God delivered them from the land of slavery. Okay, so how did they enter this land of slavery? That's the one of the important things that we have to see. So we all know that our ancestor, the patriarchs start from Abraham. So Abraham was called from the land of Ur, from the land of idolatry, and he was taken by God to the land of Canaan. Okay, so he lived there and he prayed, and God promised him numerous descendants, but he had to wait a long, long time, and then God gave him a son named Isaac. Okay, Isaac became the father of Jacob and Esau, and we know that the promise that was given to Jacob and Esau was that the elder one would serve the younger one. So Esau did not receive the birthright, but Jacob received the birthright. Okay, so Jacob, we know who he was, and we know that he had 12 sons and one daughter. Okay, so among the 12 sons, his favorite son was Joseph. Okay, because he was the first son of Rachel, his beloved wife. Okay, so he loved Joseph a lot, and which created a jealousy among the other brothers regarding Joseph. So they were so full of jealousy and hatred for Joseph that in that heat of emotions, finding him alone, they sold him to the Egyptian caravan. Okay, so after selling him to the Egyptian caravan, they went and told their father that Joseph is dead. Some wild animal had eaten him. Okay, so now Jacob is sad, remembering his son, and they are there living in the land of Canaan. Then we see that Joseph enters Egypt as a slave, and God was with him, and he was faithful in everything that he did, and he did everything with full intensity and with full devotion. And in everything that he was doing, God was with him. That is what we read in the book of Genesis again and again regarding Joseph. Okay, so now Joseph reaches there as a slave, but gradually God lifts him up, and now he becomes a vizier in the land of Egypt. Okay, so he saw dreams. That he will be that his father and all his brothers will bow before him. That's what we see, and this is what is going to happen right now. Okay, so he becomes a vizier of the land of Egypt, and there is a famine in the land of Canaan. Egypt was considered to be the granary of that time because of the river Nile. Because of the river Nile, there was plenty of vegetation every time in the land of Egypt. Okay, so the people, when they were the surrounding nations, the neighboring nations, whenever their land was struck with famine, which was struck every year basically because they did not have much rainfall, especially the land of Canaan and all. So they would come down to Egypt for some time and stay there, or they would buy their granaries, or they would buy their crops. Basically the staple foods, the rice and whatever grains they would buy from there, and they would take it to their land. Okay, that's how they used to do. So they should travel from Canaan and other parts of the land. They will come to Egypt and take sacks full of grains, and then use it in their land, and when it would finish they would come again. So that's how they used to do. So we see that there was famine in the land of Canaan, and his brothers come to Egypt, and Joseph is in charge of the whole this storing job. So we see that Joseph sees them and he recognizes them, and there is a lot of drama that takes place over there. And Joseph forgives his brothers, and then he asks his whole family to come with all the children and all the livestock and everything to the land of Egypt. So he spoke with the Pharaoh, and the Pharaoh provided them a place in Goshen. Okay, so they settled there. So now they came as 80 people in the family, but now they started increasing greatly in number. So the whole land of Goshen, because basically that borderland was full of Israelites or the Hebrew people. So gradually we see that they become so much in number that they become a threat to the nation of Egypt, or the king of Egypt. So after 300 years, okay, we can see towards the end of the 300 years, they came as guests, and they became as people of Joseph, but now they are converted into slaves. Why did this happen? Okay, so Exodus chapter 1 verse 8 tells us that there is a Pharaoh, there is a change in the rulership, and a Pharaoh who is started to rule now, he did not know Joseph. So it is written in chapter 1 verse 8 that a Pharaoh came to rule who did not know Joseph. Okay, so it's not possible that some Joseph, a character, somebody who like Joseph, who actually rescued the land of Egypt from 7 years of famine, he is not remembered or he is not known. Okay, so there is something in the history over there. So we see what the thing was, what the problem was. Okay, so previous to this Pharaoh, we have to, if we go to the background of this part, we have to understand, we have to know that previously, okay, this is the new king that came into being, but previously there was a different set of rulership in Egypt. Though they kept the titles, they called themselves as pharaohs, and all the positions were entitled by the same titles as Egyptians, but these people were not originally from Egypt. Who were these people? Okay, so there was a split in the northern and the southern Egypt in the rulership. Okay, earlier there was one rule in Egypt, and then it was split into two, the northern Egypt and the southern Egypt. So we see now that there was a Hyksos dynasty, of Semitic origin. So these were Hyksos people, Hyksos pharaohs, and they were from Semitic origin. Okay, they were from Semitic origin, and they were originally from the upper and the lower kingdoms. Okay, they were from the basically from a territory near the Nile, near that part. Okay, so they actually became a huge group of people, and they attacked the kingdom of Egypt, and they started ruling it. Okay, the one part was ruled by them. Okay, so we see that Hyksos became pharaohs, and they started ruling. So they were not originally Egyptians, but they were Semitic group, Semitic origin, the people of Semitic origin. Okay, so they started ruling. Okay, they started ruling, but gradually we see that these Egyptians took power. The original Egyptians took power, the original Pharaoh and the family, they took power, and they waged war against these Hyksos people who were ruling Egypt at that time, and they drew them away, and they fought them, and they removed them from the position. And now the upper and the lower Egypt was both united once again, and it was being ruled by the original Egyptian pharaohs. Okay, so now there was a change in the rule. So what these original Egyptian pharaohs did were, they actually took the historical records of this Hyksos dynasty, and they burnt it. Okay, why did they burn it? Because they never wanted to show the world or any nation that they were ever defeated. Okay, so they burned down all the records of this Hyksos dynasty that they were ruling over Egypt, and to show that they those to show. that the original Egyptian rulers were invincible and they never were defeated, and the Hyksos never came into being. But there are some documents from which we come to know, and the Hebrew culture, the Hebrew oral traditions tell us a lot about all these things. Okay, so we have to understand that at the time of Joseph, at the time when our patriarch, that is Jacob and his family, started living in Goshen, it was Hyksos dynasty. Okay, Hyksos dynasty. They were entitled as Pharaoh and everything because they did not change the titles and all. So they were called pharaohs only. So it is written Pharaoh, but they belong to the Hyksos dynasty of the Semitic group of people. But after Joseph, after these so many years, around 300 years, we see that the dynasty changes and the original Egyptian pharaohs come into power. Okay, so that is how we get to this, that the pharaoh did not know who Joseph was, or did not want to know who Joseph was, because Joseph himself was a Semite, okay, of a Semitic group. So, what was their fear now? So, their fear was probably, let us see who the king was first. So, now the king was Sethos I, probably. Okay, so it is, according to history, it is not sure, it is not clear, because records are burnt and there is a lot of discrepancy in that. So we see that the Sethos I ascended to the throne after the Hyksos dynasty. He was probably the new king, and he began ruling, and he began the work of building storehouses and store cities like Ramesses II, and all these cities they started he started building to store the crops and as store cities. Okay, so that is how we see it. So we see that this is the person whom actually Moses also confronted when God sent him to bring the Israelites out of Egypt. Okay, so what happened was, actually what was happening even before Moses was born. Why was the order given that the children below 2 years old should be killed? Or why did the people who were living so nicely, the Israelites who were living so nicely in the land of Egypt, suddenly become slaves? Okay, so what happened here was that this king, this new king, okay, the Pharaoh, originally of the Egypt culture, originally of the descent, they became scared, or they became fearful, they became restless. Reason being that Hyksos were Semitic group of people. Okay, Hyksos was Semitic group of people, and now they see that this Hebrew group, the Hebrew group, Hebrew people are also basically Semitic origin. Okay, they also have Semitic origin. They come from the Shem. Okay, Shem ki jati. They come from Shem, Semites. Okay, so they are there now and they are flourishing. They are increasing in number, and the population is increasing wildly. Okay, so now they have become more in number than the Egyptian people. Okay, so now the fear of the Pharaoh was that if they continue to grow like this, if this community continues to grow like this, then they may join hands with the Hyksos once again, and these are powerful people now because they have grown in number. They will once again attack us, and once again they will take away the kingdom from us. So that was a fear in the mind of the Pharaoh at that time. So what did he do? He has to do something to regain his power, to regain his position, okay, to regain his authority. So what does he do now? So he strategizes his moves. Okay, so what does he do now? He does two things. Okay, what are the two things? He does two things. He organizes the Israelites. He organizes the whole huge community of Israelites into groups or gangs of slaves. Okay, so after dividing them into groups or gangs of slaves, he makes them slaves. He makes them to labor for this building the storehouses and store cities. Okay, so that's what he did. He divided them into groups and gangs of slaves and made them slave, or made them labor to build these storehouses or store cities. Okay, so on them we can see there were in charges over them who would treat them badly and very cruelly. Okay, second thing what he did was he ordered the killing of all the male infants below 2 years. Okay, so we see that these are the two things that he did. So by organizing these groups to build the store cities, he broke the unity so that they cannot come together. Secondly, by killing the infants, male infants below 2 years, he stopped the increasing population. That's what he wanted, population and growth, because men would grow up, the boys would grow up to be men and they'll be strong. Okay, so did not want that future. So he, wanted to diminish that possibility of these young boys going into strong. Okay, so these were the two things that he strategized. So Moses, probably we can see Moses was born at that time, and it was God's divine grace and providence that saved Moses in such a situation. And he brought Moses to the palace, and he grew up in the palace, and he was trained as a leader. Okay, this thing, one more thing we have to understand here, why he was allowed to grow in the palace. So these, the Pharaoh and this community, they basically had a practice. They did something like this, that whichever place they were ruling, they would take up young boys from, or maybe infants in that age, and they would take them and make them grow on. You know make them grow in the palace. Okay, make them grow in the palace and teach them everything, teach them how to fight, teach them how to speak, teach them everything, train them as a leader. And they wanted that they wanted to use these people over their own people. So just like Moses belonged to the Hebrew group of people, so they wanted him to help them uh, rule over the Hebrew people. So he would be Moses, they wanted Moses to be in their control and work for them against his own people, like Hebrew people. So that is why they allowed they allowed Moses to grow in the palace. Okay, so this was the first thing. That was Exodus. Okay, so that's how they come out of the land. Moses grows up, and he, with God's help, and God mainly Moses helped God, I would say in that, and he brought the people out of Egypt, and that was the first theme and the most important theme of the book of Genesis, Exodus. Okay, the second theme is law. Okay, so when they move out of Egypt, they cross the Red Sea and they journey, and they journey to the Sinai Peninsula. Okay, Sinai Peninsula, the tip of Sinai Peninsula, we can see that there is Mount Sinai. Okay, Mount Sinai is one of the most significant places, and this event of giving the law, to giving the commands, is one of the most important incidences or events in the history of Israel. And it actually formed or developed the whole religion, culture, society, and ethics and everything, civil life of the Israelites as a nation. Okay, so that is the foundation. I would say that is a foundation, that was the pivot around which the whole life of the Israelites would revolve after this. Okay, so this is referred to as Magna Carta of their social order. So this was the most important thing, most important event that happened in their life, because it gave them model, a structure, and it developed them. It played a vital role in their life. Okay. So Israelites came to Sinai as a community of runaway slaves, but God turned them into a nation, and God was their king. So theocracy was established over there. So Israelite came as community of runaways, means they were running from Egypt, and now they became a nation with God as their king. So at Sinai, four kind of laws were given to them. Okay, so at Sinai, it's not only the 10 Commandments, but four kinds of laws that were given to them. So they were given social, religious, food, and medical laws. So everything related to social life, everything related to their religious life, everything related to food habits, and everything about medicines and medical, it was given. All these laws were given at Mount Sinai. So these four laws were given at Mount Sinai. So for their ethical living and social laws were the most important. Okay, so ethical living, basically God wanted people to live an ethical life and a good social and moral life. So it was very important. So these laws were very important for the ethical and social life. And we see that this aspect was emphasized by the prophets of the 8th century. Okay, because the people had lost their ethical life, moral life, and that's why social life, the righteousness that they were supposed to live with, the right justice that they were supposed to live with, so it all was lost. So we see that the prophets of the 8th century were repeating these things again and again, because this is how God wanted them to live. Okay, so the 10 Commandments was a part of these laws. So 10 Commandment was not the only thing that God gave in on Mount Sinai. The 10 Commandment was a part of their social and ethical laws. Okay, so the 10 Commandments are also called Decalogue. Okay, the 10 Commandments are called Decalogue. So Decalogue means Deca 10, Deca means 10, and log means words. So Decalogue means 10 words. It is taken from Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 13. So it is called Decalogai in Greek. Okay, decalogai in Greek. So these are the words that is also referred to basically as the words of the covenant. So it is called decalogue, which means 10 words. It is called decalogai in Greek language, and it is referring to the words of the covenant. Okay, that is in Exodus chapter 34, verse 28. So the decalogue is thus the command of God. Okay, it is the commands of God, and it represents His character. So, what are these 10 commandments? It is basically commands from God, words from God to the people, and it actually expresses or represents the true character and the true will of God. Okay, what is that now? God says, "Be holy, for I am holy." Leviticus chapter 11, verse 44. So, in the 10 commandments, we can see that the first four, okay, the first four commands or the first four commandments sum up the human duty towards God. Okay, first four commands of the 10 commandments sum up or talk about human duty towards God. Okay, and the rest six, the bottom six, or the rest of the six commandments, it applies to human duty and responsibility towards each other. Okay, so it's like just like a cross. We can say that the first four talk about the relationship between human and God. That is, it talks about human responsibility towards God, how man should behave or be with God. And the rest six commands, it talks about human responsibility towards the other human beings. Okay, so this was the second theme. So first theme was Exodus, second theme is law. Now let us look at some of the controversial topics or critical topics of the book of Exodus. First being of it is the date of Exodus. Okay, so the date of Exodus is actually a controversial topic, and it is a debatable topic. Again, so some talk about the early date, some talk about the latter date. So there is a lot of confusion about when this Exodus actually took place, because the title of the king is all Pharaoh, 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 Pharaoh. So there is no difference which Pharaoh. Okay, so that is why it makes it difficult to know that during whose reign does the Exodus take place. Okay, so there is a lack of unanimity between the Bible scholars concerning the date of Exodus and the identity of the Pharaoh who oppressed the Israelites. Okay, because only title given is Pharaoh in this account. So there are some scholars who talk about an early date of Exodus, So they say, or they assume, that it took place around 1441 BC. Okay, 1441 BC, during the reign of the Pharaoh or the king named Amenhotep II. Okay, Amenhotep II, who was the son of Thutmose III. He was a son of Thutmose III. Amenhotep II, son of Thutmose III, one of the great empire builders. Okay, so he is one of the great empire builder. Amenhotep is one of the great empire builders of the new kingdom of Egypt. Okay, so he was well known for his building, for his constructions. Okay, so how do we know this? So there are paintings. Okay, there are paintings of those times. So there is a painting found from the tomb of Rekhmire. Okay, he was a vizier at the time of Thutmose II. Okay, and it depicted a scene, it depicted a visual where the Semites were working as laborers on building projects. Okay, so this was one of the proofs. This was one of the evidences because of which they say that it is in 1441, because this painting belonged to the in the tomb. It came from the tomb of vizier of Thutmose, Rekhmire. His name was Rekhmire, who was the vizier of Thutmose III, and it depicts it depicts a picture depicting Semites, the group of Semites laboring on building projects. Okay, so they belong to the Amarna letters in 1400 to 1366 BC. Okay, so but there are a lot of difficulties again to finalize the dates. Okay, so this is not a reliable, again, not a reliable source. So next one is, due to the earlier difficulties that we saw just now in the earlier date, many of the scholars suggest that Sethos I, the father of Ramesses II, began the oppression. Okay, Sethos I, the father of Ramesses II, began the oppression, and the Exodus took place under him. Okay, under the rulership of Ramesses II in 13th century. Okay, this is the latter date, 13th century BC. So this is based on the fact that one of the store cities, okay, one of the store cities mentioned in Exodus chapter 1 verse 11 is called Ramesses. Okay, the name of the store cities is Ramesses. So based on that, this assumption is made. And in this inscriptions of Ramesses II and his massive statue of his family is shown. Okay, so there is a statue of Ramesses and his big family, which is made in the storehouses. Okay, and but we see that his eldest son is missing in the picture. The eldest son is missing in the statue. Okay, so why was the eldest son missing? Because this is a clue that we have. We can say it's a clue, not an evidence. It is a clue. Why is the first son image not there? Because probably he died. He died in the Passover. He died when the angel of death passed over the palace. So the firstborn, the first son, died. Okay, that is why his idol or his image is not there. Okay, so these are the two things that we see in the date of Exodus. The second is the root. Okay, the root of Exodus. Now again, this is also very a matter of debate, because many scholars say that it is not, they took the northern route, and then some say that they took the southern route. So there is a lot of discrepancies in and there is a lot of conflict, and there is a lot of debate on this topic about the root. Okay, the reason being that the English translation of the Red Sea, okay, the Red Sea is Yam Suf, Yam Suf in the Hebrew text. Now, Yam Suf does not tell us which. It is Red Sea or Red Sea. It is not so clear over there. So we see, and which part of that sea did they cross from is again a big issue. Okay, so some scholars state that they took the southerly route. They did not take the southerly route because it is impossible. Okay, it is impossible to cross from the north. So they say that they probably crossed from the south because it is impossible to cross from the north. That is the Sea of Reeds. They took the Sea of Reeds route, not the Red Sea route. Okay, so there's a lot of confusion in the route. Okay, so this actually is one of the most controversial topics. So let us look over here. If you can see in the map, so the traditional one, this is the traditional route, the red one that you can see, a proper strong line with the red one. It is a traditional route, and this is called the southern route. Okay, so this is the traditional route, and these are the places that are mentioned, and that is how it is connected. Okay, that is how it is connected, and all these places are connected, and you see that this is the traditional route. Okay, now the green line over here, this is the red, that is, this is the northern route. Okay, this is the northern route. Okay, so this is how we see, and this is how all these things over here. Okay, so this is the Red Sea over here at the bottom, and this is its branches going in here. So the red line here crosses the Red Sea from here, Yam Suf over here. That's what they say. Okay, this is how we understand the map and the route of the Red Sea. So these are the options that we have: the traditional route that is in red, and the northern route that is in green, and there is a central route also that is in purple over here. Okay, so but this is it is not accepted. So probably the northern route or the southern route, and traditionally the southern route, that is the red color one. This is the one that people believe and agree with. Okay, authorship. Now let's look at the authorship. It is the same matter that is in Pentateuch. So most of the critical scholars, they do not believe, or they reject the Moses' authorship, claiming that the historic setting is not matching with the writing. But the modern scholars in archaeology again disapprove the critical scholars, and traditionally this book is credited to the authorship of Moses. Okay. Reason being, because this whole book of Exodus is actually written in a way where you can feel that eyewitness is talking about it. Somebody who is living those moments is writing. There are so many details in it. So traditionally and mostly, it is believed that Moses has written because he is the one who was actually leading the whole event. Okay, and he is the best person to write all these things down. So traditionally, yes, authorship has been accredited to Moses. Okay, let's look at the outline. Exodus chapter 1, verse 1 to 22, oppression of Israel by the Egypt. Exodus chapter 2, verse 1 to chapter 12, verse 36. It is Moses and the 10 plagues. Then we have chapter 12, verse 37 to chapter 18, verse 27, Israel in the wilderness. And then the last portion is talking about the construction of the tabernacle, which is mentioned in chapter 35, verse 1 to chapter 40, verse 38. Now, let's move on to the book of Numbers. Okay, so the book of Numbers is also very interesting. Something is happening throughout the book of Numbers, and it is also a very good book to read and learn from. Okay, so the book of Numbers. So the book of Numbers is the fourth book in the book or in the section of Pentateuch. Okay, this is the then we see we'll come to the Leviticus and Deuteronomy together in the next chapter. Okay, so we'll take the book of Numbers now. There's a fourth book in the biblical order. Okay, so we see what is the title, about the title of it. Okay, so Pentateuch, the Pentateuch is we can say in the Hebrew language, sorry, it's not in the Pentateuch, but in the Hebrew language, the topic or the title is Bemidbar. Bemidbar, sorry, Bemidbar. Bemidbar, Bemidbar. Okay, so the title in the Hebrew text is Bemidbar, which means in the wilderness. Okay, in the wilderness. Okay, this is a very much more apt title rather than the one that we have Numbers according to the Pentateuch. Okay, so this title of In the Wilderness is much more suitable than the top title that we have at present, that is Numbers. Okay, so English title is Numbers. It comes from the Latin translation of the Greek title, that is arithmoi. Okay, so arithmoi, arithmetics, as you can understand, arithmoi. Okay, so the English title comes from the Latin translation of the Greek title, that is arithmoi. Okay, so it is Numbers in English because it is arithmoi, arithmetics, and it's maths, numbers. Okay, so that's what we see. So this is referred because this is the named as arithmoi or numbers because of the two senses that took place in this book. Chapter 1, verse 2 to 3, and chapter 26, verse 2. But we have to understand that the title is quite misleading. Reason being, there are so many other things that happened in these 38 to 40 years of their journey from the time, from the 2 years they left from Egypt up till they were, just standing at the border of the promised land. So this is the story of around 38 to 40 years. And there are a lot many things that happened in this course of time. So naming it as senses or naming it as numbers does not, does not solve the the reason for that, for it being the title. Okay, so it does not give an apt picture of the whole book. Okay, so other titles that we can see is we can call it the book of grumblings of the nation. Why the book of grumblings of the nation? Because people were grumbling the whole time for everything. So we can also call it the book of grumblings of the nation. Okay. Then we can also call it in the wilderness. It will be the wanderings in the desert. Okay, wanderings in the desert. So these are some apt titles that could have been given to the book, but we can see that we have the title as numbers, and that's what we are following. Okay. So though it is not apt, but we are following the same title. That is because of the LXX or the Septuagint. So the result of this was that we can see that there was so much grumblings and there was so much murmuring, so much complaining, so much discontent among the people, that the result was that this generation who actually saw the miracles from the hands of God, who actually saw so many supernatural things done through Moses by God, they ended up being wiped away. The whole generation above 40 years was wiped away because of their disbelief, because of their lack of faith. Okay, and they could not enter the promised land. They began to leave, and they left Egypt to enter the promised land, but they could not enter the promised land. Okay, only the youngsters, especially below 40 years, and only three of them actually, Joshua, Caleb, and Moses, actually were the people who touched the borders of the promised land. And of three of them, only two of them could enter the promised land, that is Joshua and Caleb from that present generation. Okay, so the book, we can say, it contains many challenges. Okay, many things that these people faced throughout the journey of wilderness. Okay, but the two three main things happened in this book. Two main challenges was faced by Moses, apart from the people, apart from the murmuring of the people, apart from that disbelief of the people. We see that there are two main challenges and two main events that take place in this book of Numbers. Okay, this is not the census, but Moses faced as a leader. There are two important things we see that Moses faces as a leader. Okay, first thing. Okay, first thing that we see here, that every time people were gathering around him for small and big things. Okay, so he was a judge, he was a counselor, he was a leader, he was a shepherd, he was everything, one in all, everything. He was one in all in one. Okay, we can say. So he was the one to whom everybody would go for every biggest and every smallest problem for every solution. So Moses was troubled, and he could not, you know, he could not do what he was actually supposed to do. Okay, that was the first thing. And the second thing was the issue where Miriam and Aaron led a rebellion. Okay, they rebelled against Moses. Okay, so let's look at these events because it's an important point of important because these are related to the family of Moses. So there are grumblings and everything outside the family, but these are two events that happened within about the family, as the things that originated from the family. Okay, so Jethro, we see Jethro, his father-in-law, he had come to meet Moses, and if you all remember, he was married to a lady named Zipporah. So his father had he brought the family with him, his sons and his wife, he brought them together with him. And he felt that it is not right that Moses should leave the responsibility of his own family and lead this whole group of people. So he brought his family to Moses so that he can take care. Moses should take care of his family also. So according to him, it was not right that Moses stays away from his family responsibilities, and that's very true. Okay. Secondly, we see that Moses was surrounded by people all the time and every time, and Jethro then suggested him a very wise thing. He said that you appoint 70 spirit filled elders who can deal with the daily issues of the life, of daily problems or daily routine problems. Okay, so they can deal with all these things. And if there is something that is insolvable, that is something that they are not able to solve, then they can bring the problem to Moses. So this was done, administered at that time. Okay, this is the first part. And then we see the second thing. Second thing that this issue of Moses having two wives. Okay, so many people think, and many scholars are of the view that Moses has two wives. Moses had two wives, but there are no evidences mentioned, or there are no evidences for this. Okay, so we see that Miriam and Aaron complained about Moses's marriage to a Cushite woman. Okay, so they complained about Moses being married to a Cushite woman. Okay, but there was something else under the currents. Okay, what there was some other reason why they were complaining about this. Okay, so this all was happening, and we see as a result that God defends Moses and Miriam because she was the instigator, she was the person who started this rebellion. We see that she's punished, and she God's punishment actually falls upon her, and she becomes unclean, and she is to go out of the camp and live there. But we see that Moses prays for her and intercedes for her, and God heals her. Okay, so what was this problem? Basically, what is happening now? So this name Cushi, that's they complain that Moses is married to a Cushi woman, Cushite. Okay, what is this Cushi? Cushi is linked with the North Arabia. Okay, North Arabia. So it is possible that Zipporah was the reference point. That means they're talking about Zipporah only. They're not talking about some other woman. They're talking about Zipporah itself, herself, and whom Moses was married to. She was the wife of Moses. So Bible remains silent about this. Hence, we cannot, dig more and take out the conclusion that Moses was married to another woman or something like that, because Bible is not telling us anything about this and apart from this. So verse 2 makes it very clear that the real source of grievance was, what the problem was. Miriam was a prophetess. We all know that Miriam was a prophetess, and Aaron was the high priest, and Moses was the main leader. Okay, he was a center of authority. He was the main leader. So probably Miriam and Aaron tried to assert their equality with Moses. Okay, that is one of the things that we see in Micah 6 verse 4. Okay, but what was this conflict about? This conflict is recorded in what is happening. Basically, we'll see just now in some time that the conflict is recorded. Why is it recorded? It is recorded because it is about, it is about the conflict that is within the family of Moses. It's not about others, it's not about outside, but it is within the family of Moses, within the family of a leader. So it is important how it is dealt with and what happened. Okay, so this conflict is recorded because it is in the book, because it is a family conflict. Okay, so the original language indicates that Miriam was the main attacker, or she was the main instigator. So she held an important position. We have to understand why it is also mentioned, and why Miriam is, highlighted over here, is that Miriam is a very important character. Okay, so we may feel that some scholars have said because she was a woman, so that is why she was punished. No, that is not the case. That is not the case. God doesn't differentiate between woman and a male as a leader. So we see that she holds a very important and responsible position. Okay, because we can see that because of her, because of Miriam, Moses' mother was able to nurse him when he was a small child. Okay. And secondly, she was a prophetess. She would sing songs and psalms and lead the whole of Israelites in battle or wherever they used to go. She would be the person who would, lead them with songs, with psalms. Okay, and she was a person who actually introduced us to the first psalm in the Bible, the first song in the Bible. Okay, so she is a very, very, very important lady. She's a leader, and when a leader does something like this, it becomes an issue. So we have to understand that because she was a leader, her act of rebellion is counted and a judgment comes upon her, because she is an important woman, she is an important figure in that place. Okay, so the real issue, what is the real issue? The real issue is concerned with Moses' prophetic gift and his relationship with God. Okay, so it's something revolving around it. So we have to understand what is it, what is happening over there. Okay, so it's not that she's competing with Moses. Okay, it's not that she's competing with Moses. There is no competition between her and Moses, because she knows her position and Moses' position. Okay, so we have to understand now that why is she pointing or blaming Moses for something. Okay, so Cushite, first let us understand the concept of Cushite. She calls that he is married to Cushite woman. Okay. Now, Cush is the son of Ham, and these are the people living in the Nile Valley, southern Nile Valley, Ethiopia. So many times they are more dark skinned. Okay, they are more dark skinned than the normal common Israelite. Okay, so it is assumed there are two aspects that are assumed over here, and probably the second one is the correct aspect over here. So it is said that probably it was because Zipporah now came into the camp and she becomes the first woman. Okay, till now, Miriam was the first woman. Now Zipporah comes and she becomes the first woman, being the wife of the leader. Okay, so there is a jealousy factor coming in. Okay, so some scholars talk about this jealousy factor. That is why she is accusing Moses, because she's jealous of Zipporah. Second thing, and that is which is widely accepted nowadays, is that because Zipporah was of a darker skin, so there is a racial discrimination being done over here. So the issue is not woman versus woman, it is not woman versus man, but it is rather a basic differentiation of racism. There is a resentment of race against race. She was more darker, so there was, we can say that she is against, she's talking about racism over there, because she's talking using the word kush or kushite. So she's using the color, okay, the dark color, or you can Kushite, sometimes Kushite and Ethiopia is interchangeably, because they use interchangeably because it talks about the skin color, the tanned skin color of the people. Okay, so when she uses the term Kush over here, it basically is probably talking about the racialism or racism that Miriam is talking about over here. Okay, so probably this was a factor that we see over here of racism. So the attack on the woman was a pretext, for the real issue was at stake. Okay, so let's now move ahead and let's move towards the end of this study. That is, we'll check the outline of the book of Numbers. So chapter 1 verse 1 to chapter 10 verse 10 is a preparation for the journey to the promised land. Then Numbers 10 verse 11 to chapter 12 verse 16 is the first approach to the promised land. And then we see Numbers 13 verse 6 verse 1 to chapter 19 verse 22, we see the conquest of the Transjordan. And then Numbers 22 verse 2 to chapter 36 verse 13, we see the events in the plains of Moab. Okay, so this is all that we are doing in the book as a survey of Exodus and Numbers. In the next chapter, we'll deal with the books of Leviticus and Deuteronomy. Okay, thank you. God bless you.